Hi, I'm Spencer Christian. On this episode of Tracks Ahead, we'll go into the Carpathian Mountains in western Romania to rediscover a narrow gauge line that is undergoing some clandestine restoration. We'll visit with an artist and modeler whose books have become a must for model railroad enthusiasts. And we'll go to Florida, where a company can build the model railroad of your dreams. Imagine you are an award-winning chef with a highly successful restaurant and that you had a passion for trains. Now suppose you had a backyard the size of a football field. Let's visit a man whose imagination has become reality and whose desire to think big has resulted in a monumental layout.
Dennis Sarine is a man with a passion, and for the last 2 years, that passion has been all-consuming. He's building a dream he calls the Palo Verde and Southwestern Railroad in suburban Phoenix, Arizona. This magnificent G-gauge garden layout meanders over 36,000 square feet of Dennis's property. And while there is still much work to be done, the dream is finally beginning to take shape. When completed, the Palo Verde and Southwestern Railroad will be one of the 3 largest layouts in the United States, with a level of realism and detail unsurpassed anywhere.
We designed the layout to have 2 main lines, about 2,000 foot each one. We also have a logging section, a mining section, and we're going to have 2 towns, and it's going to go for a long ways around this property. Most we're using USA engines, modern SD40s, SD45s, Mac 8s, Mac 9s, with some steam, but I'm mostly a diesel kind of a guy. The mining operation is going to be up in the mountains. It's going to have a coal tipple, and we're going to be able to go get the cars, bring them down to a lake, and unload them on a dock. The lumber is going to be very similar to the mine. It'll be in the mountains. We'll have shays, heislers, climaxes. They'll go up on switchbacks, up to the logging area, pull the logs down on log cars, come down to the mill, and they'll be milled there on the water. The interesting aspect, I think, of this layout is we have a building that we made special for this layout. It'll house 10 to 12 engineers. They'll run the layout. We're able to stock all the trains in the building. We also have a 9-track staging yard where we can put all the trains, where we can stage them and then bring them out into the layout. To run it prototypically would be 10 to 12 with a dispatcher. And because of the main lines, logging, I have 2 yards, and the mining operation, it will take at least 12 people to do that.
So just what was it that motivated Dennis to take on this monumental project?
I used to be a builder for 20 years, and I was building large custom homes. And I thought for a little trick, it'd be nice to put G-scale trains at door level height and run them through several rooms. I did it in the first home. It sold like hotcakes, and so I started doing it from then on and just fell in love with G-scale. It's an expensive hobby. I finally got some money, got some land. I decided to do a nice G-scale layout here in my home. I got the layout out of several magazines and rough sketched on a piece of paper. I'm using 4 main lines. I'm using a mining town, I'm using a regular town, and I put it all together, and we're dealing about 2,000 lineal feet of main line.
When the project began, Dennis never imagined just how expensive and time-consuming it would become.
I have a lot of money invested in this thing, well over $500,000, and just the aspect out here alone, not counting the rolling stock engines and passenger cars. This is an immense project. I think I bit off more than I can chew. It's taken a lot of time. I feel like I'm building a real railroad. It should have been finished 2 months ago. Probably another year or so to really get this thing under where it should be, exactly, prototypically correct, running like a top. The biggest challenge of this construction was getting the track right. I listened to what I thought was an expert years ago who told me to solder the track between sections. When I did that, I found out that the track changed characteristics and got smaller. So when we put all this together, we were having derailments at the junction of track. So we had to rip all the track out. We had to cut off those sections that were soldered, reinstall the track, and then go that way. Right now we have it on concrete roadbed with it's kind of like a carpet padding that's made special for railroads. It's kind of a sub base. And then we put the track down and we screw every 2-foot screws into the track to hold it to the whole roadbed. The landscaping has been a challenge. We've had to do the infrastructure of all the flowers, planter boxes. This is all irrigated land around the railroad. Plus, we've had a real struggle with the lake and streams. Every time we get to a point where we want to concrete the liners, it's rained or we've had storms. We've had to rip it out twice now and put it back together. So we've had some challenges there trying to get this landscaping up to speed.
After 2 years of intense labor, it's hard to imagine that there's still more to be done.
We are probably 5/8 of the way finished at this stage of the game. All of the track is down, the wiring is complete, the building is complete. We have to finish our mountain scenes, we have to finish some of the landscaping around the track areas, and then when we get that done, we should be pretty close to being completed. This is unique because it's so huge. It's going to take garden railroading to the next step, which is the cross between realism and the actual landscaping of flowers, which will be very unique in the United States because nobody's really doing that.
Just building the rock scenery for the layout has been a major piece of this complex puzzle. Bruce Ambrose is Dennis's rock scenery expert on the project.
My company is Canyon Creations. I've been building artificial rocks here in the Phoenix area for about 6 or 7 years, mainly for water features, landscape, architecture, that kind of thing. The rocks themselves are made out of a lightweight concrete. They're made in a mold, a cast mold off of a real rock, so I have real rock texture. And we basically just bring these rock panels to the job site, cut them, break them, and to whatever sizes and shapes we're looking for, and start backfilling with cement. The panels themselves are made out of a lightweight pumice. That's just to allow us to move them around easy, cut them easy, so we can ship them around and work with them easy. The backing to it is all concrete reinforced with rebar. The finished, the color that goes on the rocks, once the rock itself is all built, it's still flat gray like this. It doesn't have any real color to it. So we come back in with basically latex paints and do what's kind of a staining process. They're watered down, and it takes 5 or 6 coats of different colors to bring them up, to give them some life, give them some depth.
And what advice does Dennis have for those who would follow in his footsteps?
If I was going to do this over again, I probably would have broken it up into smaller sections. It's been almost 2 years and I haven't run trains till about a month ago, and you really want to start running trains as soon as possible. So I should have broken it up into smaller segments, started running my trains, and then added to it as I went along. It would have been a lot more enjoyable than waiting 2 years to start running my trains.
And when all this is completed, what will visitors enjoy most about it?
I think they're going to enjoy the trains running in long distances, long trains, the prototypical situation. They're going to really enjoy this. It's a really great layout.
Our hats are off to Dennis Sarine and his Palo Verde and Southwestern Railroad. His dedication and persistence are inspiring to any of us who have ever had a dream.
Dennis plans to use his control house to display his collection of Lionel trains. You know, it's always satisfying when you get to the point in life when you realize there's one thing you can now do very well. And it's pretty darn impressive when you have the opportunity to meet someone who does not just 1 or 2, but 3 things and does them all well. Let's head out to New York State and meet a gentleman who's a modeler, a photographer, and an author.
In the world of model railroading, Lou Sassy is somewhat of a Renaissance man. He does almost everything, and he does it all well. Lou is a photographer who's taken pictures of a variety of layouts for modeling magazines. He's an author of a number of how-to books for model railroad enthusiasts. And he is a longtime modeler himself.
Well, it all started in the late 40s when my father gave my brother and I a Lionel train set for Christmas. And for about 8 or 9 years, I played with a Lionel set and added to it over the years. Until around 1958, I believe it was December of '58, I picked up an issue of Model Railroader magazine. And in that issue, I saw some scale model HO trains that really impressed me, the photographs and the realism of the models. So I changed over to HO after that, and I've been in that scale ever since. I started shooting photographs back in the late 70s. The first photographs I took of a model railroader were actually on a diorama that I had here at the house, and I won the Dremel Kit Bashing Award for it. Shortly after that, in the early 80s, I started doing photo shoots for Model Railroader, and just kind of steamrolled after I first started with a photo shoot or two. to the point where I was freelancing for them on a regular basis, shooting many model railroads all over the country. Well, I started doing books back in the early 90s, and I've done 2 so far. One on an HO layout that grows, and another on scenery for model railroads, and I'm presently working on another edition which will be super detailing scenery for model railroads.
As you can clearly see, Lou's talent and expertise are evident, developed over many years. Lou Sassy has been working on his own layout for more than a quarter of a century. It is, and always has been, a work in progress. And what a work it is. So realistic that it pulls you back into its 1950s time frame. His HO scale West Hoosick division runs between Massachusetts and Vermont. It's a bridge line owned and operated by the prototype Boston and Maine Railroad in northwestern Massachusetts and southeastern New York. It's extended to Bennington, Vermont, where it interchanges with another popular New England railroad, the Rutland. Lou's layout evolved as his expertise grew. It became more and more realistic. Gone were the days of freewheeling and freelancing, where his primary goal was to loosely capture the feel of New England railroading. Now, it's a replica of reality. It has symmetry. It flows.
By focusing on a particular prototype, you have a family appearance to the locomotives. You can do research and find out what specific cars ran on the railroad. You can research the structures around the railroad, the scenery around the railroad, and you can base the model on reality. A few of the favorite features or locations on the layout are, a couple of them in particular, are the large trestle at Saw Hill. And I think that's a favorite because it took me so long to build the thing, and there was so much involved in the construction of it. There's 3,000 nut bolt and washer castings on the trestle. Well, the Hoosick Tunnel West Portal area is one of my favorite spots because it was a model of. It was given to me by a group of modelers in Massachusetts who actually made a model of the west portal of the real Hoosick Tunnel. And the other version of that one is on display at the Heritage Park Museum in North Adams, Massachusetts. Back in 1996, when there was a commercial video done on the layout, I finished all of the scenery. And since that time, I've added a closing loop, an unscenic closing loop, which allows me to run through trains. So in the future, actually, I'm just planning on adding a few more buildings, scratch-built structures to the layout, and just operating it on a regular basis.
Lou's books usually offer advice on simple techniques you can use to make realistic scenery for a layout of any size or scale. Step-by-step instructions for building a complete layout. It's pretty obvious he knows what he's writing about. But some of his most valuable advice is basic. Be willing to accept help from friends. And always remember, enjoy what you're doing.
I know a lot of modelers who take a great deal of pride in knowing that the railroad or the model railroad is all of their work, that they've done everything. But myself, I get a great deal of pride in knowing that I've had a lot of talented people, friends that I've made over the years through my photography work with Kalmbach and people I've met in the hobby, and that making my layout kind of a showcase for not only my work but their work brings me a great deal of satisfaction and pride. For people getting into the hobby, I would say that my feelings are that you should probably bear in mind that it is a hobby, and as such it's something that you should enjoy. No matter what you do, enjoy it. Have a good time. Use it as a source of relaxation. Don't take yourself or it too seriously, and I think you'll have a lot of fun at it.
Lou Sassy is testament to both the possibilities and the pleasures that come with knowing how to do something well. And he's proof that the route to excellence can be full of enjoyable experiences.
Lou's attention to detail is remarkable, and it's amazing how little items can really make a scene come to life. Some people get great pleasure out of the long hours and many years they spend building their model railroad layouts. And then there are some people who get their satisfaction out of simply enjoying the beautiful dream layout that someone else built for them. In a moment, we'll check out a Florida company that, for a price, can turn any model railroader's fantasy into reality. But first, the beautiful Carpathian Mountains are found along the northern border of Romania. The deep valleys and steep hillsides have slowed progress, and it's there that you can still find remnants of the old railroads which were the primary means of transportation until the late 20th century. Let's meet a man whose personal mission is to keep railroad history alive in the region.
In western Romania, just inside the Carpathian mountain range, you'll find a railroad. And it isn't just any railroad. Until recently, this narrow gauge line was in service as the only modern means of transportation into the deep mountain valleys. In addition to bringing supplies and passenger service to the remote areas, the line also served to haul minerals and gold between the western town of Turda and the eastern mining town of Abrund. Built in the early 1900s, it faithfully carried goods and passengers along its 98 kilometers for almost 100 years. But highways were built, and the line became unprofitable. All has not been lost for this railroad. George Hosebar, a Swiss businessman, owns a local company that refurbishes scrap railroad cars and mining equipment. He sees a future for this rail line.
Because I'm a very big railway enthusiast, for me it was very sad to see how all the narrow gauge railway lines in Romania slowly were closed and damaged. So I can tell you that in '89, before the revolution, in Romania there were 2,000 kilometers of forest railway lines and more than 400 kilometers state railway lines for freight and passenger transport. And until 97, 98, almost all of these lines were closed. And for me, it was a passion to make something to not be lifted all these lines. And from our business, we can make some financing for some of these lines. We want to show the Romanian government that some lines are still existing and that it is still possible to run trains on them. And this line, Câmpeni-Abrud, is a very beautiful line in a very beautiful area, and we wanted to make some example here.
George considers himself a preservationist with a fondness for narrow gauge railroading. He's purchased his own engine and his own railroad cars in an attempt to recreate the heyday of the line, and he feels strongly about the need for preservation.
40 kilometers from here there is our factory. We have a factory with 270 employees, and we build and we rebuild narrow gauge wagons there, and it is neighborship. And every time when we have business in Cluj, we are passing by this line, and it's very pity to see that it is damaged. And so we started to make something here.
But his efforts have not been without obstacles.
So the biggest problem on this line and on all the other lines on which we are working is that some people are stealing all materials. So if you look here on this line, here on in 3 months, they were stealing on 3 kilometers all nails, all screws, and it was necessary to start again here. So last year in August we repaired this 12 kilometers completely, and now it was necessary to work again 4 weeks to complete the material. So in 4 weeks our staff was putting more than 8,000 nails to rebuild the line here. And that won't be never the same quality as was before, because the sleepers are in very bad condition. Until it was fixed with screws, it was good, and now it is only improvisation.
While the Romanian government still technically owns the line and right-of-way, all the villages hope that the line will be restored and brought back to life.
The city of Abrund is very glad to have this train, and when we had these activities last year, I made many publicity calls to the politicians. I'm very glad of this program, because it is very good for this area to have a tourism attraction for the people who can come to this valley.
So George continues his battle to keep a bit of history from disappearing. Not only is the railroad a fledgling tourist attraction, it's a historical link to the past.
Look inside this building in North Miami Beach, Florida, and you will see, step by painstaking step, the construction of a new standard of excellence. The company is called SMART. It stands for Scale Models, Arts, and Technologies. If it is a three-dimensional miniature you want, they can build it. Anything, any scale. The architects, engineers, and artists who work here have nearly a century of combined experience in all types of model making. They build architectural models to help builders and city planners, motion picture quality display models, and museum quality model railroad layouts. The typical customer is well-to-do and wants the best.
Originally, we started with older gentlemen who were train enthusiasts their entire lives, harbored the dream to have a layout, never really had the opportunity. They're either retired or in semi-retirement, have some more disposable income. Their kids are grown, all their basic responsibilities in life have been discharged, and now they want to have a little fun. They don't have their own personal time or inclination or the skills to actually build the project, so they come to us. The three basic guidelines are, in my philosophy in doing this, are it's got to look absolutely beautiful, it's got to perform flawlessly, and it's got to be relatively easy to use. This is no doubt a luxury item. I would say that, to be perfectly candid, it's very rarely can we do a job under 6 figures. Essentially, when we start one of these projects, we start off with a design. Much of the information is supplied by the client through a questionnaire that we have. We come up with a track plan, which generally looks something like this. Once that's approved in plan form, we will also show it in elevation form, which can be something like this, or like this. You know, showing the different elevations. We'll also provide a three-dimensional rendered look, something like that. And then once we get the go-ahead, we do the mechanical engineering.
It's kind of like building a house. First, there's desire, and that's followed by design and construction. The promise is that you will always be in control of what's being built and how much you're spending. The process can take many months. The layout is built in modules, which are then disassembled, loaded on a semi-truck, and reassembled in your home, just like a jigsaw puzzle, by a crew that flies in to do the work. The guarantee is that you will be incredibly satisfied, even if what you want is a non-traditional layout suspended from the ceiling of your condo with hundreds of feet of track running through 2 rooms and a hallway with an elevator that delivers the trains to the track. You want it, you got it.
I wanted to have the use of having a long, space for the trains to travel throughout like a large home, but yet didn't have the large home to do it. So this was the best way to do it off the ceiling and against the wall.
A smart-built layout can transcend time. It's your memories of the past and just what you want for the present. It is exactly what you want it to be.
Right now I'm standing at the centerpiece of Mr. Linsky's layout, the late Paul Linsky. He was a train lover his entire life, and this Line L O-gauge layout was the culmination of numerous layouts he had throughout his lifetime. This is the centerpiece. It's a bi-level 6-track swing bridge. It actually allows you to get in and out of the layout.
I think he loved the colors of the trees, the fall foliage, which reminded him of Cincinnati. He loved the engine house. He loved the time period. He sort of loved that 1950s, early 1960s period with the layout. And one of the things he loved to do with the layout was photograph it. He was a photographer throughout his life, and he spent a lot of time playing with his new digital cameras and photographing the different scenes, different vignettes, and he loved it.
So there is a place in Florida where dreams come true. Step by step, piece by beautiful piece.
George hopes that tourism will help keep the line from being destroyed once Romania is in the European Union. That's all for this episode. Please join us for the next Tracks Ahead.